so get in touch with us. Now, we've received a large number of emails from a group of women born in the 1950s known as Waspis, Women Against State Pension Inequality. Many were given a very little notice that they wouldn't be receiving their expected pension at 60 years old. Instead, there would be a delay, and in some cases, this was as long as 6 years. We've covered this issue a lot on this programme, but there's been a recent development. Last month, the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman found the Department for Work and Pensions guilty of maladministration in the way they dealt with communicating the change in state pension age. It's a subject you feel very strongly about, particularly if it directly affects you. If it does, we'd love to hear from you. We had a letter in from a lady named Sue. She says, I was born in August 1956. I always expected my state pension when I was 60. It was the most awful shock to receive a letter from the DWP in July 2013 advising me my new state pension age was to be 66. My husband and I had always planned to live in Portugal when we retired, and he's 2 years older than me. He agreed to wait until I was 60. So when I got the news that my state pension was being delayed for 6 years, I was devastated. The DWP had given me just 3 years' notice for a 6-year delay, which gave me no time to change my financial situation. Had I been informed in 1995, when the law changed, I would have set up a private pension and joined my employer's pension scheme sooner. I'm living on savings and my husband helps support me. I've always been an independent person and I hate having to rely on someone else to pay for me. He doesn't mind, but I do. It's a loss of independence for me, not being able to pay my way. It's demeaning. Well, one listener, Jane Cowley, was a head teacher who retired early at 57 in order to care for her husband and elderly parents, believing she could manage financially ahead of receiving her pension 3 years later. Jane was shocked to find this wouldn't be the case and would have made a very different financial decision had she been informed earlier. Jane is with us this morning, and also joining us is Daniela Silcock, Head of Policy Research at the Pensions Institute. Let's come to you, Jane. Tell us about your situation.
Hello, Anita. Thank you very much for having me on this morning. Yes, I was working as a head teacher. At 57, my husband was in ill health. My parents were getting more elderly, and it seemed a sensible thing to do to take early retirement from my job, take a reduced occupational pension, and live on my savings for the 3 years until I expected my state pension. And only in 2012 was I actually informed that my state pension age was not going to be 60, but was going to be 66. So that's a huge gap there, really. I mean, it's a big loss in income. It's a big, again, I'm like the other listener who's written in, I've had to rely to some extent on my husband's income, and I've lived as an independent person all my life. And although I love my husband very much, I don't really want to be having to rely on him financially. There are other women who are also having to rely on partners for financial support who are in less happy circumstances. We are really angry that it's taken all this time for the Parliamentary Ombudsman to finally vindicate what we've been saying since 2015, that we weren't properly informed. We've had government minister after government minister, letter after letter from the DWP telling us that we were wrong, that actually we were told properly. And now this report has come out to actually say what we've been saying all along, that proper notice wasn't given. What's actually making things even worse now is that the government seems to be, well, first of all, we've had no statement from Therese Coffey, the minister, to actually acknowledging that this maladministration has happened and saying what she intends to do about it. And also lots of Conservative MPs are sending out what seems to be a standard letter, trying to hide behind a smokescreen of equalities legislation. Well, our campaign has never been about equalisation. We fully support that. What our campaign about is this lack of notice and not being told in good time.
Of course, because you would have made preparations differently, as so many of you are telling us. I'm going to bring Daniela in here. So a victory for the cause, but are this generation of women one step closer to getting compensation?
Well, that's quite difficult to say. The Parliamentary Ombudsman has said that they won't be able to say that they'll fully refund all of these women what they missed out on in terms of state pension because of the government statements. So compensation may be on the Ombudsman's sliding scale, which varies depending on how severe the impact of the injustice was, which goes from, I think it goes up to £10,000 or more from £500. So that is that's going to be the next step to see what they recommend and whether or not the government has a response.
Right, so you're still waiting to hear on that. Why weren't these women given enough notice? What happened?
Well, it's quite complicated. What you have to go back to understanding is changes in life expectancy over the last century and how rapidly they started increasing. So life expectancy did increase after the state pension ages were set at 60 and 65 for men and women. And I think those ages were solidified around the 1940s. In the 1980s, life expectancy began to increase much more rapidly. And around the country, around the world, people weren't really doing much about this. So it was really towards the end of the 1990s when countries started realizing both their private pension systems and their state pension systems were in danger in terms of sustainability, because they were going to have many more pensioners living for a lot longer than they expected. So the state pension age rises that we're experiencing now are really trying to catch up with what happened in life expectancy. Just to contextualize that a little bit, in 1908, when the first state pension was introduced, life expectancy at birth was 40 years for men and 43 years for women. And in 2016, it's 91 years for men and 94 years for women. And also in 2016, around 85% of people actually reached state pension age, whereas in 1908, only 24% of people did. So we're seeing many more people actually reaching state pension age, and then people living for much longer in receipt of state pension.
Sure, so state pension age is rising, but it still doesn't explain why it took them so long to tell Jane. Jane, come on in.
Thank you. Yeah, I accept everything that Daniela has said, and she's quite right that, pension age did need to be probably increased, although we don't like it, but it certainly needed to be equalised, and that's never been something that we've fought for. But what I would say is that the report that's come out showed that, for example, in 1997, the then minister said that he didn't see a pressing need to inform women about this change to their state pension age. In 2000, the DWP had research which showed that many women were unaware of the change, and that research carried on. There was further research in 2004 which showed the same, and the DWP chose not to act on that research. Which is clear maladministration. That's what the WASPI campaign is fighting on. It's not about equalisation. That really is a red herring in this discussion, if I might say so. Our beef is about not being told in good time to, as you say, Anita, make sensible financial arrangements to cover that increase in time until we got our state pension age.
What would you have done differently? Because you retired at 57. And to look after your husband and your elderly parents. What would you have done differently had you known?
I think if I'd known that I had to face a further 9 years from 57, I probably would have perhaps tried to work part-time rather than retiring. And I mean, again, that would be a sensible decision as you come towards the end of your working life. Many people do take that decision to reduce their hours and to free up time for caring responsibilities which so often fall on the shoulders of older women, whether it's for grandchildren, husbands, parents, whoever it might be.
And this is before we've even hit a pandemic, which for WASPI women had another impact. Like, how has it been for you? Has it been a real struggle?
Well, I think I can think of one woman whose case I've heard about, who was made redundant age 60. At 60, to find another job as a woman is very difficult. She didn't just sit back. She actually set up her own business at that point to support herself until her retirement age. Obviously, the COVID simply knocked the business for six now. She's used up all her retirement savings and she's relying on universal credit, which doesn't pay her bills and is really in a very difficult financial situation.
Daniela, what other adjustments can be made to help women affected by the state pension age rise who are in this bracket?
So there's a few things that can be done and have been considered. One of the debates that's been going back and forth is extending pension credit to women who are particularly affected. So perhaps women of certain ages or having pension credit be extended to people via the older timetable. I believe that WASPI itself is not necessarily in support of this because it doesn't necessarily, because pension credit is means tested, it means it wouldn't necessarily recompense every woman who's affected. I think Jane's situation is actually quite typical in that a lot of women have had to leave work early because they're providing care to parents or partners. So other options could be done through carers credits, some sort of recompense through carers credits. And I think also Jane's raised some really good points, which is that part of the issue is that working age benefits don't pay at the same level as state pension benefits. So there may be some real motivation here to look at working age benefits and whether they provide people with a decent income. To some degree, this isn't necessarily just a pensions policy problem. It's really about benefits in general and whether or not people who are vulnerable or on low incomes for particular reasons are going to be supported at every stage.
Jane, Daniela, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I'm sure we will be coming back to this. Mary Baker has emailed in to say, I didn't find out until I was 60. I wondered why I hadn't been contacted about my pension. I was horrified. I was devastated. I've had to work an extra 6 years, quite physical work, driving and tour guiding. I'm now crippled with arthritis and angry beyond belief. I was never notified. Rubbish, reliving longer and now going down. We paid in and they should pay out. If you want to get in touch with us via email, then go to our website. Now, it has been Listeners' Week.